Welcome to episode 9, Epoxied. In this episode, I take several layers of 1708 and fiberglass them to bolt the port and starboard side of the boat, as well as insert the galley frame and its supporting members. You can see the placement of where the 1708 is going to go against the divinacell core. This will create a sandwich-like structure between the top deck fiberglass and the divinacell core using the new 1708. The process begins by covering the divinacell core with a layer of epoxy. After covering the core with a layer of epoxy, I then began to make a thickened epoxy. This thickened epoxy will be used to cover and plug any holes or crevices that are found in the divinacell core. This will be used to plug any of the air bubbles or prevent air bubbles from happening when I start putting the layers of 1708 over the divinacell core. And of course the GoPro ran out of battery, so we'll try it again on the port side. You can see here the finished product of the starboard side with those 3 layers of 1708. Came out really well and was extremely strong in the end. So now we flip on to the other side of the boat where we have the same scenario of the divinacell core requiring 3 layers of 1708. This time around I have charged GoPro batteries. Let's continue on to see if we can create that sandwich structure between the new 1708 and the divinacell core. Again, here I'm taking the thickened epoxy and laying it over the divinacell core to fill any gaps or crevices to prevent air bubbles from happening when I start laying the 1708 over the divinacell core. Now begins the process of laying the 1708 on the divinacell core. It gets a little tricky at first, but once you get the hang of it, it goes fairly smoothly. The trick is not to let any air bubbles in and squeegee out anything as quick as possible before the 1708 starts to fall down on its own. Once a majority of the 1708 is connected or touching the divinacell core, it creates sort of its own suction and stays on its own, working against the forces of gravity. The title of the episode comes to light. So much epoxy used in this fiberglass. chose to lay the 1708 up in these smaller sizes you see here. When I did the starboard side, I laid it up in much larger slices of 1708. This was fairly difficult to do, and I had to use the rolling technique to adhere the 1708 to the divinacell core. Using the smaller pieces, I have much more control, and it can allow for better accuracy placing the 1708 on the divinacell core. This makes my job and life a little bit easier, although maybe the structure suffers, I don't know. One last thing to mention when I was putting up the 1708 against the core is that I use these pieces of the 1708 tape to adhere the top deck to the hull of the boat. Now this is filled with thickened epoxy first in that little joint, and then this tape is put over that thickened epoxy. I really think this increases the structural strength of the entire boat and really fuses the two pieces together. And if you remember from the previous episodes, the top deck and the bottom hull are also connected using the rivets. Coming along pretty good. I got the 1708 up here today. I put 3 layers on this core. So I finished the port side. I had done the starboard side last week. So I'm just going to let this cure overnight, and that should complete a lot of the fiberglass core and deck replacement. I still have the roof to do up there, but that's not too much of a big deal. I don't foresee that taking too long. So yeah, I'm pretty excited, and it's looking good. So I start prepping the surfaces of the galley vertical support and the bulkhead support that's going to go perpendicular to that galley frame. Here you can see that galley frame and the corresponding divinacell bulkhead that will be prepped and sanded to be inserted into its spot inside the boat. This frame and the corresponding bulkhead were created in the previous episode using stir sticks and hot glue. Now you can see the layers of 1708 that I have on this divinacell core are being grinded off here. These layers of 1708 were used just to increase the structural strength of this divinacell core and really provide a firm surface to epoxy the galley frame to. So I began checking the exact fit of the galley frame and the corresponding bulkhead inside the boat, and I prepped the surfaces to epoxy both of these into place using the 1708 tape and of course the thickened epoxy. See how things line up inside the boat when the galley frame gets put perpendicular to that bulkhead against the Arctic cooler you see there in the back. It really adds a new dynamic to the boat, and you can't help but let your imagination run wild and fry that first fish inside the galley. In order to keep the galley frame vertical during the installation process, I use these two 2x4s you see on the left and the right side of the screen, as well as these clamps which were attached to the adjacent side seats for the dining area. This allowed me to screw the galley frame into the 2x4s, which kept it secure for the installation process. Per usual, I cover the pieces that are going to be inserted with a light layer of epoxy. So I start the actual installation process with a smudge GoPro. Unfortunately, the GoPro footage isn't ideal, but it's still there. After securing the pieces in place, I'm ready to start fiberglassing with the 1708 and the thickened epoxy. Cha brah, I can finally cook some food in my new galley. And of course, I don't catch much of that on camera. So I've been cutting out some templates here and some hatches you can see back there. Basically building some bulkheads and the remainder of the core out of that Divinacell that I have. So this is the last remaining parts on the boat that I have to build, and then basically it's just putting them in and the boat should be sailable. Everything on top of that is gonna be I guess an afterthought or an aesthetic touch, but this is the majority of the structure and it's coming along nicely. So I gotta cut these out. This is gonna be core. It's gonna go on the top deck roof. This is a bulkhead right there. Basically I've already fiberglassed this, I just need to sand it and make sure it fits. This is a bulkhead for the galley. It'll be used as structural support. That's 2 layers of 1708 on each side, and that'll be quite strong when it gets epoxied in there. And then over here I finished cutting out a whole bunch of hatches. So I gotta cloth the top hatches. You can see this is one of the hatches for the bed area. Be nice and light and super strong. Same with this hatch. This will be going up in the front V-berth. This one was already designed out of wood, but I decided to make it out of foam because I like the strength and I like the lightness of these. It's easier to pick up, and when you're at sea or somewhere else on the water, it's going to be much easier to handle this, something that's really light, as opposed to a giant piece of plywood. And then here's another hatch. This is for the V-berth insert. I'm going to add another layer of cloth to this, just because it was bending before when I put a lot of weight on there. When I mean a lot of weight, it was probably like 100 pounds. It started to bend a little bit, so I'm just going to add another piece of cloth, and I think that'll give it the structure that I want, the strength that I want, I mean. So this is that piece of plywood, and yeah, it's kind of heavy, but I don't know, I just prefer foam. I got the extra foam and I got all the material, so might as well. Probably hear the jets going on. The air show is going to be this weekend, so that'll be fun. Yeah, that's what's going on. Everything's looking good. I will keep you updated, but... So that's it for episode 9. I really hope you enjoyed everything that you saw. Be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.